Alrighty, well, it's the last week. Thank you all for coming. Weather and things have been prohibitive of people getting out, plus some health issues and work conflicts, but I think ultimately things have gone well. I've got some interesting stuff I think to talk about this evening, and then we're gonna get it all up online, and hopefully some more people can be blessed when they have the time to review the content and stuff like that. Fred, would you like to open us in prayer this evening?
Father God in heaven, we give you thanks for this opportunity that we have together to learn your word. We ask, Lord, your blessings over the speaker. Let your word go forth with anointing. And bless each one that's here, and we give you praise and glory in your wonderful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. So, quick recap again. You know, we were talking initially about names and their power, how they're one of the most unique types of words because over time the content and the definition of a name actually does change, and in particular your own name, you actually have a lot of control over that because the choices that you make, who you choose to associate with, how you choose to conduct yourself, things of that nature are going to determine what your name means to people when they hear it, right? If you're a generous person, if you're a kind person, if you're a wrathful person, if you're a liar, if you're habitually late, right? You know, we all know when Wrong Way Roseman, my grandmother, who I love dearly, that if I want her someplace at 4 o'clock, that event starts at 3:30. and so, you know, you learn things about people, and even, and this is, you know, maybe a failing of all of us, but even when people do change for the better, if they gain a reputation for a particular negative quirk, we tend to associate that with them long past when they have grown out of it and changed, right? So that type of stuff really sticks with us. And, you know, for the most part, other than maybe your own personal pet, animals don't know anything about you. They just see human, right? You know, other creatures don't really think about what you are or what you mean, but those that you interact with, those you associate with, and in the day of the internet, anyone who has access to look anything up about you, they're going to have an opinion about you, and they're going to have a definition of Tony, of Fred, of Pastor, of Garner, right? Just before you ever say a word, if they can get access to information through word of mouth, through looking you up, through watching you, observing you, they're going to have an opinion, and that's going to be the foundation of their definition of you, right? We talked about last week, we got into the different names of God and how he had revealed himself in different times in different places, or different proclamations that different followers had made, acknowledging his power, his mercy, his capacity to heal, his capacity to bring peace, to bring victory, things of that nature. And that our God is the one. He is the one that is. I am that I am, as he says to Moses when, again, in the context of they're in a polytheistic society, there's all these different gods. Who should I say is sending me? He asks God when he's revealing himself in the burning bush. I am that I am. And again, I take that, you know, to mean something like I am all that is good, all existence, all consciousness, all that is good. I am, right? And but he shows up for us in the way that we need. And I think that's what's so cool. Even though he has all of these attributes, he can be your personal healer, your personal savior, your personal chain breaker when the time and the events coalesce and it's time for that, right? So tonight, we're going to talk more about the narrative side, and we're going to briefly go over, I've got 30 examples, so we're going to kind of touch on each of them pretty quick because we only have so much time, about times that God has called different followers to do various things, and we've touched on some of these, but we're going to focus on the person this time and not so much what God was necessarily trying to do and how the person reacted and how we can learn from their reactions, what they chose to do or not to do, and maybe when they were being less than obedient, what God did to deal with them, and maybe looking at examples in our life, if we're honest with ourselves, because, I'm not a fire and brimstone type of minister or teacher, but I am one to say, maybe when there's a problem, I'm the problem. Just maybe. Maybe if I would have done things a little different, I wouldn't have gotten to that argument. Maybe if I would have done things, even today, I was just telling Pastor, I was finishing up a text to TJ in the middle of orientation today, and we had just been on a break, and the woman had just started. And in my defense, she didn't give me any time. She didn't say anything like, hey, I need everyone to wrap up whatever they're doing and whatever. She just kind of launched right into it. But then she snapped her finger at me. I didn't like that. And I got angry and I got bitter and I got resentful, and this woman, I don't need this job. I'm just trying to pay off debt faster. I ought to walk right out of here. I should, these are all the things I'm saying to myself. And then I paused and I thought, and I was like, when I'm at church and I see someone sitting there on their phone while pastor's trying to preach, that really annoys me. And if I were the one up there and I worked really hard and maybe I had stage fright, maybe I was nervous and someone was sitting here on their phone, maybe that would annoy me. And maybe instead of getting so upset at her for doing something that was, I think, objectively rude, I should think, well, if I wouldn't have been on my phone, she probably wouldn't have done that. And then I wouldn't be having any of these thoughts in the first place. So again, just want to think about what can we do? How can we position ourselves as we are carving out our story, as we're writing our narrative and defining who we are and what our name is? When can we maybe take a little more accountability and responsibility for our actions, be more faithful, be more obedient to what God is calling us to do, and maybe things will work out a little bit better. So that's the idea tonight. So I've got this mostly in order. Towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about some Paul stuff before we get into the gospel stuff, but we're going to start in the Old Testament, okay? So first, very early in the flood narrative, we've got Noah, again, being called to build an ark. And we already touched on this some last week, but I just want to really impress upon everyone just how nuts that is. I mean, really. Like, even back then, especially maybe back then, you've got people trying to survive, literally trying to get enough food to make ends meet, trying to make sure that their shelter is durable enough for your average storm, trying to watch out for snakes, right? I mean, we're talking about a desert-dwelling people. They've got a lot to be worried about, right? They don't have the niceties that we have. And then you have one guy who tells his sons and his wife and everyone who notices what he's doing, I'm going to stop worrying about all of that, and I'm just going to build a really, 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 really big boat. Like a boat proportionally compared to anything that anyone had seen, it would have looked like something alien. I mean, it's... I feel like since we've all grown up with the story so long, we lose just how amazing and how crazy this story is. Build an ark. And again, you imagine they're desert-dwelling people. There's likely not been very much rain over the course of the last several years. I mean, I'm sure there was some, but not enough to constitute anyone worrying that the planet was going to flood. And here's this guy building a boat 500 times the size of the next biggest structure that anyone has ever seen, which they would have considered a palace. You know what I mean? And so...
Which they found.
Yes, absolutely. And again, the flood narrative of, for all the different objections and different things that people want to say, on that side of things, like, it is the most concrete, verifiable thing in history. Whatever else is true, whatever else anyone thinks, atheist or whatnot, there is strong evidence that the planet was flooded, and there is strong evidence that there was an ark that survived it, and that's how the species was able to maintain and survive. So, but we have something great with Noah. Noah doesn't argue. Most people, when God calls them to do something nuts, they're kind of like, this is nuts. I'm not going to do it. Or I don't see why I should do it. Or I don't understand. Noah is pretty faithful. So we're going to, real quick, talk about kind of what was happening. So now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. But the sons of God saw the daughters of men and were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Skipping ahead a little bit. So God is, God is upset, right? At this point, we've had the genealogy. We know that people have lived for hundreds of years at this point who've taken care of themselves and are the most closely related to Adam and Eve, right? So those who were initially formed and created and destined to live eternally, right? They would have been functionally immortal on earth had they not succumbed to the fall, right? Am I? Yeah. And so I think when we read about the extended lifespans of all of these ancient people who are directly in the line of Adam, that is sort of the residual effect of that implicit intended immortality that was woven into the initial human genetics. And then at this point, God's like, some of these people are really mucking about in things. They are messing things up, and we need to put a hard limit on how long any one person gets to be here. But you've got Noah, and so it says, the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them. Now, I have definitely completed some projects in my life that I was ready to just kick and destroy and whatever, and maybe I've done that once or twice, a really shoddy chair that I tried to build or some school project or something. And Aurora has ticked me off before, something fierce, but I've never thought to myself, man, I just got to get rid of her. I just need to end her. She's done it, she's crossed the line. And I really believe that God views us as a good earthly parent views their children. That we are his children, that we are of him, that we were made in his image. And you gotta be something rotten. As a species, of course, he's referring to us at this point, that God's just like, I just can't with you anymore. We've been doing this and doing this and doing this, and you're killing your brothers, and you're trying to replace me with giant towers, and you're doing all these, no, that's a little later, I'm sorry, but you're doing all this crazy stuff, and you're not being faithful and loving and content, we might say. And so God says, I'm sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now, I know I'm taking this line by line, and we're going to speed up as we get to some other stories, but again, this is so cool to me that in the face of adversity, when the culture is going crazy, when the world is going crazy, and I think we can all agree, we're finding ourselves in a pretty crazy world right now, a righteous person can still find favor with God, right? He is almighty, he is all-knowing, and he will be cognizant and show favor to those who are faithfully living as he's commanded, right? So, we got through the generations, and God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. Then God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them, and behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood, and shall make the ark with rooms, and shall cover it inside, and lays out the instructions. And then in chapter 7 he says, and then the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this time. So again, just recognizing that even when the world is going crazy, it might be tempting to say, well, if I were to just cheat a little bit, or if I were to just lie a little bit, or if I were to just fudge the numbers a little bit, I can get ahead and nobody's going to catch me because this person lies all the time and this person cheats 3 ways from Sunday where you can't even tell when he's acting straight. And this person, they've cooked their books so bad. Like, if I do it just a little bit, I will enrich myself. I will help my family, and I'll get away with it because they're not going to come after me. They're going to go after the big guys, and completely missing the point about integrity and things of that nature. And so I guess, again, just really hammering home that like integrity is something that you do because you're supposed to all the time, and not because God will reward you, but I can promise you he will. If you live with integrity, if you do what you're supposed to do, even when no one around you is doing it, even when it seems like everyone is a liar, a cheater, a thief, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, all we can do is minister and pray and protect ourselves and guard ourselves. I'm not saying to be naive. I'm not saying to live like a sheep to slaughter, right? We need to be ready to defend ourselves and to be cautious against the forces that are out there. But just because we're defending ourselves doesn't mean we have to succumb to that same type of evil, undermining behavior, right? And God notices clearly. And so commands him to take all the animals. And as we know, the long and the short of it is they survive, him and his family, and creation is saved. But then, this is, I guess, the one thing we're going to say about Noah. Noah's so happy and everything goes so well, he gets drunk. The only man good enough in God's eyes to constitute saving the species still messed up. So even if you have been on a long, long journey and you have walked that straight and narrow for a long time, if you mess up, that's not the end. And just because someone is great in your eyes, I know that I am prone to put men, godly men especially, on pedestals because of my personal situation, not having that role model, that father figure. And I think sometimes I unwittingly put too much pressure on them, and then when they fail, because we're all human and it happens, it can mess up my view of them. And at the end of the day, it's like, how many times have I done exactly that this month? How dare I place a higher burden on them than I'm even willing or able to walk myself right now? And so just be reminded that the man that God viewed as the only one good enough, the only one that found favor with him to justify saving the entire human race, he got drunk. Like sloppy drunk not long after all of this settled down. So encouragement for me anyway, that if someone like that can still mess up, I guess it's all right if it happens once in a while. Not that I'm trying to mess up, not that I want to, but to not be so hard on myself. And then next we're going to talk about Abraham. And when I started looking for reasons to become an atheist or to leave the church, how many people know if you look for evidence to prove something, just about anything that you can conceive of in your mind, you'll find it.
Yeah.
You will. Whatever you want to believe, we have this thing in us. It's innate and it's hard to shake. It's observation bias. That's why good science, good, objective, clean science is so hard to come by. Because if people go out not to investigate a general question like, I wonder why things tend to fall whenever there's nothing holding them up, right? That would be the pure investigation into gravity. Not, I wonder how gravity works, like assuming gravity before you had already established that it was a thing, right? And so, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. On Abraham and Isaac. Oh, that when I see a God commanding a man who has been nothing but faithful in my estimation up to this point in the story, and he finally, well, other than that business with Hagar, but we'll set that aside. We'll put that on the shelf for a second. And he finally gets
just doing what his wife suggested.
Well, and he was submitting to his wife.
That's right.
And so he gets his natural born son through his actual wife, and then God calls on him to go and sacrifice his son. And you need evidence for someone who being a parent is about the most important thing in the world. You're looking for evidence to not believe in God. That was a really compelling first step to walk away.
Sure.
What kind of God
Right.
would command that? That was the question I kept asking. What kind of God would say some terrible thing, right? And I just kept repeating that over and over and over again because I really and truly didn't understand how this loving God could allow, cause, or in this case, outright command something so evil. Now, of course, we all know how the story ends, right? That on the other side of that mountain, that ram was crawling up into place and getting prepared.
Yeah.
And the command wasn't a malevolent command. It was a test of faith. And I couldn't quite figure that out for the longest time. If God knows who we are and what we are, why does he need to test our faith? And I think I figured it out. I don't know. But he doesn't test our faith for him. He tests our faith for us. He wants you to see how far you can go. He wants to encourage you that you have more in you than you realize, that you are capable of putting aside your own selfish desires, even one as enormous in this case. And I think that's exactly the reason why it is what it is. Your firstborn, natural-born son that is going to carry your line, that you have been told by this God that you're communing with will be the line to many generations, so many that you won't be able to count it. And now you're being told to give that thing up that you just got, relatively speaking, like within the blink of time, you just got it. And now you're asked to give it up. And that to know that you can get to the place where you're like, I came into this world with nothing, I'm leaving with nothing. Whatever I have while I'm here is a gift. And if I'm not willing to give it back to the Creator who gifted it to me in the first place, I'm not really right with him. Not really. And it was a cool epiphany for me that God doesn't test our faith to prove anything to himself because he knows what we're going to do. He tests our faith so that we can prove to ourselves what we're constituted of. Because it's easy to say, well, I would never do that. Or I, of course, would have done this. Well, maybe, until you're there. Because let me tell you, it's one thing to talk about, we recently went through firearm training. Well, if someone pulls a gun on me, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to try that. I don't know if you've ever had a gun pointed at you. It's a terrifying experience. I'll tell you what happened the first time to me. I wet my pants. I did.
Yeah.
I was scared out of my mind. I thought I was going to die at 20, whatever I was, 20 years old, 21 years old. It was terrifying. And I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have anything. I was just shaking, scared, praying still at that point, hoping. And thank God there was an undercover cop right there, comes and immediately takes the guy down, and here I am, and everything's fine, and thank God. But you don't know what you're going to do when you're faced with an impossible situation. And I think that's why God puts some really tough challenges in our story sometimes. It's not because he's a mean kid on an anthill with a magnifying glass like myself and other atheists had once portrayed him. And it's not even that he's trying to ascertain anything, because he knows. He is teaching you what you're capable of, showing you how far you've come, showing you that when he says he won't put anything on you that you cannot stand or overcome or triumph against, he means it. It doesn't always feel like that when we're going through it. But again, if Noah can build something impossible and Abraham can be willing to sacrifice his son, I think we can give up that extra indulgence that we indulge in. I think that we can come to church a little early to help greet people. I think that we can stay a little late to help clean up. And not saying that anyone here doesn't do that already, just in general, just making points. Like, we can do a little more. We can sacrifice a little more. Next, we're going to go to Moses. And with Moses, the first thing that we have to realize about Moses is, yes, he was an Israelite, but he was raised as an Egyptian, right? Again, I think some of the most iconic stories, we hear them so much, and the profundity and the amazing circumstances are lost on us. Because the more you hear something, the more it's like, oh yeah, that's the story of Moses. But I mean, this was a prince. I mean, this would be like Hunter Biden having a come to Jesus moment and starting to right all the wrongs of his father. I mean, I don't know about you. I know our God is a powerful God, and anything could happen tomorrow, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. I'm just saying.
I'll hold my tongue.
But that's what we have. I mean, lap of luxury. You can imagine women that he wanted, could have summoned them to his chambers at any time. All of the most rare delicacies. I mean, Egypt was in the height of its power at this point in history. He would have been in the top 10 most powerful human beings on the planet by staying as a prince of Egypt. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about someone who had it all, despite being born of the slave class of that nation, which is another just really weird thing to wrap your head around, right? And he has this encounter with the God, not a hallucination with some of this Egyptian magic that they were pulling off, not even he was going mad or something because he was starving. I mean, he's a well-fed, well-bred prince, and he encounters this burning bush, and it calls him. And so Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and who have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey. I want to stop right there real quick. Milk and honey, I don't know if you know this, you probably do if you think about it for a second, but are the only two things that I can think of that nothing dies when you consume milk and honey, right? Nothing. When you consume plants, you're killing a living thing, not a conscious thing, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't eat plants or animals, but that milk and honey is a really profound thing, especially when you think about how old this story is. Only two known things, the only two known consumables that are sweet and fatty, and again, we're talking about people in the desert. What's that?
So put it together and make ice cream.
Put it together and make ice cream. I mean, this is the stuff. This is the stuff that, again, we hear milk and honey. It's like, well, I can just go to the grocery store and get milk and honey. You couldn't just go get milk and honey. I mean, milk and honey was a rare commodity, and milk, you're talking about unpasteurized. You got to get it straight from the source, and you got to be using it, right? And honey, you better be prepared to get stung. It's gonna happen, right? But a land overflowing with milk and honey. I just think it's really cool imagery and to think about what it represents, right? that great, nurturing, rich, sweet things that no one and nothing gets harmed in the process.
Adding to that, in order for the cows to be preserved, they have to have something to eat. So it was it was a land that they could thrive on as well,
Right.
as well as the bees. So it was not only just something to consume, but the nature of it itself is, the whole land
Was going
lush.
to be
Yeah.
right, and again, I keep coming back, beating us over the head with this, but we're not talking about Midwest America. We're talking about Egypt, a desert.
Right.
Yes, there's the Nile. Yes, there are oases. Yes, there is some lush patches, but on the whole, they're in a desert. So, communing with God, and then God says, "Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt." His brother, right? Not biological, but he was rescued as an infant.
Right.
This is his brother, as much as any other adopted siblings anywhere in the world who were raised together for their entire life. This is his brother. And I mean, they were very close in age. You can imagine they were close. They wrestled, they raced, they competed for women, they competed for the favor of the previous Pharaoh, their father,
Yeah.
right? They're brothers. I mean, they're thick as thieves. This isn't just some political officiant. But this, I think, is a cool point to realize about preordination, that what Pharaoh would have listened to anyone and given them the time of day and allowed them to survive as long as Moses did.
Yeah.
No one but a brother. And in some sense, I think we see this redemptive element of the brotherly story. Despite them being completely at odds, neither one of them resorts to murder, right? So you kind of have this anti-reflection of Cain and Abel, where you have a minor squabble that the unfaithful party decides that their story is going to be death, destruction, chaos, right? And now you have a major squabble. I want to take your free labor force. All of them. We're done. Well, most political rulers would be like, no, and if you keep bothering me, you're dead. That's it. But because of the redemptive power of family and brotherliness and brotherhood, they both played as nice as they could, relatively speaking, right? God didn't just come and turn Egypt into a crater and tell the Israelites to walk out, right? And Pharaoh didn't just immediately slaughter them all, right? Because of the brotherly bond, they were able to negotiate and have the time to get to understand one another better, and the escalation was very slow. And had Ramesses not pursued him after they left, both brothers could have survived this altercation, right?
Yeah.
So, getting to the crux of this one, therefore come now and I will send you to Pharaoh so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? He said, certainly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? And what should I say to them? And again, this is important because you're talking about people who've been in a polytheistic society for a while now. And the gods have names. Sobek, Osiris, Isis, help me out here, Anubis, Horus, Seth. So, they got quite a few different gods that have different functions and that do different things. So it would be a very reasonable question for them to say, well, what's his name, right? And again, the coolest answer, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Okay, so Moses gets one of the strangest narratives in his life, right? He is supposed to be murdered as a child, right? Because the Israelites are getting too powerful. The Pharaoh realizes it. Go kill all the young boys, right? His mother, being obedient, saves him. He's raised as a prince, despite, he was death-bound. Instead, he gets the exact opposite life. And then he gets called to confront his brother, to be the salvation, the shackle breaker of an entire nation, and is ultimately successful. Jumping ahead, he's supposed to be the leader and the speaker, and he's got a speech impediment. He's not really good with this, and so God provides a helper. And I think the Red Sea is another, just one of those impossible things. Again, we're not talking about a stream. We're talking about a sea. We're talking about a body of water so great that no average person could cross it if they wanted to. Parts the way, right? And on some level, we know this because the nation of Israel still exists today.
Yeah.
And they were all there. You don't get out of a situation like that without a miracle. Jumping ahead to Joshua leading the Israelites into the promised land. We don't really see him objecting per se. He doesn't whine and moan like some people do, but God is constantly offering him reassurances. And so I take that to mean that God is aware of some insecurities or some doubts that Joshua's having, because again, they've been wandering in the desert for a long time now. And when you just break free, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to paradise. Great. We've been in functional hell. We're going to paradise. This is going to be awesome. And then 2 years later, you're like, well, hell's not looking so bad because this sucks. And how many people do we know that have done that?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. They've started to straighten up their life. They've given up the alcohol. They've given up the drugs. They've given up the pornography or the prostitution or whatever. They've given some vice up. And they start to come out of it. But coming out of a lot of bad life choices, it's not a picnic. You don't end up in paradise the next day. In fact, because you typically are more conscientious, if you're the type of person who's deciding, I want to better myself, I want to change my life, I want to walk forward on a different path than I've been walking on, odds are good that you're going to be more aware of just what a mess you've made of your life. And then it might take a week, a month, a year. You're going to have this sobering realization of, this is hard. It's hard to do all the things that I've always done and not have alcohol to escape to. It's hard to take care of money and not be juggling debts and things like that. It's hard to focus solely on my duty and responsibility and not look for frivolities and other hedonistic pleasures to indulge in. It's hard. And a lot of people end up backsliding, and I think it's not because they think it's a better life necessarily, but it's easier, right?
Sometimes they give up every friend they had because they're still in that. You know?
Mm-hmm. And again, I know with addiction in particular, especially physical dependency addictions, you almost have to give up your friends. Not because you don't love them, not because you want anything bad for them or you're judging them, but for your own health and safety, you have to remove yourself from that lifestyle and that situation. And you can pray for them, you can encourage them, you can, I think even to an extent, if you are strong and you have been working yourself for a while, can communicate with them, but you can't commune with them, right? Because it's much, much easier, especially if the devil had already had his hooks in you on something, to fall than it is to bring out. God can bring anyone out of anything, and I have truly witnessed some miracles on that front of people being really captured by things and that have seen complete deliverance and are able to start walking a new path and never backslide. But as miraculous as that is, I have often seen people who have made great progress over months or even years and then they start hanging out with the wrong crowd again. And it's deep in you. And the devil knows, the tempter knows how to get you.
Yeah.
And that's not by way of blame or again, shirking the responsibility, because you got to choose it. He can't force that alcohol down your throat. He can't make you take those drugs. He can't make you watch those obscene images. But he sure will do everything he can to get that stuff in front of you. So anyway, that's my takeaway from Joshua, that God will do what he can, will put the people in your life, will give you the resources for encouragement. So even if you're not resisting the call on your life, he'll still help to walk you through those doubts, because our God is a powerful God. We don't need to doubt. If we are living properly, what God wills will come about. There's just no other way. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to be where you're supposed to be. Maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow. It might be a week or a month or a year or a decade. We don't know how long our desert's going to be, I guess is the point I'm making. But it's as long as it needs to be to help you become the person that God intends you to be and to live your ministry, right? We all have ministries, every last one of us. And it's, what is your ministry going to be? Okay. I'm taking way too long on this early stuff, I'm sorry. I'm going to rapid fire go through a bunch of the examples that I had real quick, and then I'd like to open it for discussion for a minute, and then we'll wrap because we don't have much time. So Gideon, when he is called to battle, and he doesn't think that there's any way that he's going to be able to be successful. I mean, that the odds are against him and forces are against him, and he's so low born and he doesn't have any status and nobody likes him. And we all know, again, through deception and trickery and playing on sort of natural human behavior and what people are going to do, he was able to overcome outrageous odds, right? Again, by being obedient and by following up with what he's supposed to do. Talk about Jonah, and you think about being called to tell someone, like, it might be a coworker who has been struggling with smoking, right? And they've communicated this to you, and they've told you they're trying to quit. Heck, maybe they even quit for a couple weeks. And then you see that they're just having one of those stressed out days, and you know what they're about to do. You know they're going to go find someone to bum a cigarette from, or whatever. And you feel that tug on your heart, like, you need to say something to them. You need to encourage them. You need to try and remind them why they gave cigarettes up. Because if you talk to someone for 5 minutes and they're doing something hard like that, they'll tell you why they're doing it. And they'll tell you why it's important to them. But the thing is, and I don't precisely understand why this is, but we have so little faith and confidence in ourselves anymore, many people, especially younger people, that all it takes is an encouraging word sometimes to just recharge our batteries, reset our focus, and be like, you know what, you're right. I do want to give up cigarettes because I'm trying to live better for my children, or I do want to give up alcohol because I don't like the type of person I become whenever I drink, or whatever it is, right? That just that word of encouragement of, I know it looks like you're having a really tough day, and it looks like you're really struggling, and I can see that it would probably be really easy to go and have that cigarette, or to go and have that drink, or to go and do that thing. But you remember what you told me, how important it was to you that you give this thing up? And you remember how excited you were when you talked about getting started, and when you made it to day 5 and to day 10 and to day whatever. Mm-hmm. I know that it's hard, but I think you can make it one more day. Mm-hmm. Let's take it one day at a time. So being encouraging and following God, because even though Jonah was called to minister to an entire city, right, that had fallen to wickedness, when he didn't do what he was called to do, the ship got rocky and the storms that came, and he ended up getting dragged down to the depths by a great fish. And I guess my point is, sometimes living properly doesn't mean not sinning. It also means being obedient. And that you might find yourself in a really terrible set of circumstances hopefully not being dragged down to the depths in a giant fish, but if you decide to not be obedient when God calls on you. Because I don't know about anyone else, but for me, guilt weighs heavy, really heavy. And if I even think that there was a 1% chance that had I gotten over being uncomfortable and had the courage to walk up to someone and be like, I know that you want that cigarette right now, I do. Just remember, and it's so taboo today, much more than it was 30, 40 years ago, I think, to my mind, from what I'm only 35, but I feel like people were much more willing to be that encouraging, that tough encouraging voice, that I love you, but you need corrected voice when I was younger than I do now. Now it's like I just see people kind of shake their head or roll their eyes, but nobody says anything. And there's power in words. There's power in admonishment. I mean, the closest people to me are the ones who say, Garner, you're being an idiot right now. I mean, seriously. I don't want friends that tell me I got it right all the time because I know I haven't arrived. Really, I want them to say, you should not be doing that, or you really ought to do that. Because like I'm pointing out right now, there are times when you know you're supposed to do something and you don't do it, and then you're wondering, where are my blessings, or why am I not this, or why are things going? It's like, I haven't done anything, I haven't been drinking, I didn't curse, I didn't do this, I pay my tithes. You kind of go down the list of all the things you think you're not supposed to do, and that you know you're supposed to do, and you did them, and then in the back of your mind that God called you to do something. Something uncomfortable. Because let's be honest, that extra stuff, it's almost always uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's ministering in the inner city. It's talking to someone who, man, you just can't stand that person. You've had so many fights, they've been so nasty to you. God puts it on your heart. As far as I'm concerned, that's what you got to do. And you're not living right if you don't. So being sensitive and perceptive to what God calls you to do and to living honestly to do it. I'm going to conclude with a cluster. So one of the coolest things is when Jesus is recruiting the disciples, at least as far as we can tell from the accounts, nobody really argues with him. They all just stop what they're doing and they go. And again, we take that for granted, right? We're told that as kids, and he said, come, I'll make you fisher of men. And they put down their rods and here they go. But again, imagine, let's say I, maybe a little less well-dressed, came in to Irwin, and I was like, stop embalming, stop doing that, come with me, we're gonna go help people, let's go. I mean, you'd think I was mad, right? I mean, if I just started showing up to different vocations, saying, stop what you're doing and come hang out with me, people are gonna be like, well, I can't, it's my job. I gotta do stuff. So, I mean, this was a huge leap of faith that these men took. And they were persecuted, they were ridiculed, they were looked down upon, they were viewed by many as heretics in their time, right? Following someone who is either claiming to be or is professed to be by others the Son of God, right? And almost all, I don't think, were ultimately executed.
All but John.
All but John.
Yeah.
All but John. That's dedication and commitment right there to some random guy that you don't know saying, hey, come on. Right? And as far as I can tell, Jesus and God very, very rarely call on people to literally, physically give up their life anymore. But it might seem like it sometimes. It might seem like giving up XYZ or having to do 1, 2, 3 might functionally be giving up your life, because you have to completely change everything about who you are, your social circle, where you're living, your financial situation, whatever. But if you live honestly and something is really on your heart, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on video and speak it out. I've known for years that I need to pursue a PhD. It has been one of those few unshakable things that has just gnawed at me And I have made every excuse in the book why I'm not going to do it. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, it's going to take too much time. Oh, there's not even good career prospects. For every philosopher job out there, there's 1,000 applicants for one job. And that's not an exaggeration in some cases. But it doesn't matter ultimately what all the objections are if it's not something I want, if it's something that's on my heart that I can't shake, that I can't get rid of. So I am making plans and preparations to study hard, to prepare for the GRE, to take the test, and to go through the process. And if I fail, then so be it. I fail. And I'm not trying to fail. I'm going to give it my best effort. But if it works out, and it's what I was supposed to do, then all I can say is I'm living the adventure. I'm writing the story that God had laid out for me. Because he did give us free will. And even though he has written it all down, I think in the book of life, what your journey can look like if you live honestly, truthfully, courageously, obediently, you got to walk that path and you got to write that story. And it's not always going to be easy. And there may be some long interludes where if someone was reading the story of your life, they're like, what the heck was Garner doing from 28 to 33? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, man. I don't know where this is going, but it's because they haven't got to 35 through 40 yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I have for you, and I'm interested to take any questions or hear any other thoughts people have. Quiet tonight. All right, well,
Well, when you even talked at the end about getting a PhD, I remember when Emily said God told her to become a lawyer, and it was like, that wasn't in our family, you know, and it's like, if you're gonna do this, you're on your own with that. We can't pay for that. We can't, and yet, when it was in her heart and she knew to do it, she did it, and has never ever been sorry. And so with you, you know, when God tells you to do something, he'll make a way, you know, he will. Mm-hmm.
thank you. And I finally, I think for the first time in my life, really believe that.
Mhm.
Really, fully, deeply believe it. And I'm just having to move in faith. And, you know, I've put myself in some impossible circumstances. And I, again, talking about the hardships that we go through, like when I was living improperly, I messed my life up bad.
Mm-hmm.
And those things don't go away just because you decide to start living right.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to get your house in order. You still got to clean yourself up. The past doesn't go away because you start living properly, right? And my reputation, while I didn't do anything to badly damage it, it still has been damaged. And even though the new person that God has made, that he has forgiven and sanctified, is who he is, I still have to walk and live with the consequences of my actions. And that's my desert that I'm in right now, you know? And it means that life is much harder right now than it would be if I wasn't trying to get to set everything in order. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
What's the next topic?
oh, I don't know who's presenting next.
We don't know yet. Probably won't have it next Wednesday. I'm trying to put another thing together, so for probably February.
Have you thought about maybe taking like maybe a chapter out of like Corinthians or Romans or something, maybe just every week study maybe a few verses out of that? Or some other chapter?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Just a thought.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, in the discussions we've had, like keeping Wednesdays kind of free form, and again, we could definitely do, I think at some point, a sort of biblical deep dive into a particular book or something. I think the video series with Jonathan Kahn was great.
Yeah.
Gina's series on deliverance was powerful and shed a lot of light on some things that there isn't always a ton of clarity in the original text, but when you look at supplemental materials, you look at the history of deliverance and things like that, and someone who has been a part of that ministry can really breathe a lot of life into that. So what I'm hoping for is that we continue to get people who've had very unique experiences and are living
Express that, yeah.
very, how should you say, they're living their ministry, not necessarily have a formal ministry, but they can have a formal ministry too, and just kind of talking about the things that God has laid on their heart, because I think that's ultimately one of the coolest things that we can discover as a body is what are the things that God really has put in your life, like the stuff that bugs you and the stuff that you love. The stuff that makes you you, essentially, like, because I think that is how we discover more about each other and ourselves, and maybe we become aware of some types of ministry or some types of things that weren't even on our radar. Like, of course I know about, say, the homeless problem, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, in St. Louis and the surrounding area, but it wasn't until she brought it up and how it has been heavy on her heart and wanting to do something about it. It was like, you know what? Blankets and shelters and tents and things like that's a really direct way to not enable any vices or things that people might be suffering from, but to make a meaningful impact. And I think that's why God lays different things on each of our hearts so that we can communicate and express that and then come together and collaborate and cooperate and coming up with solutions.
Lets us get to know one another too.
Uh-huh.
You know, the things that we didn't know before, you know, like with you, with your teaching, things that we didn't know, you know, things that so many people, like I just talked about Emily, the way she was born and didn't breathe for 8 minutes or whatever, and had brain damage and yet ended up never having to study in school through a miracle. I mean, there's so much that we don't know that when someone like you teaches, we learn about them, you know.
Yeah, I think part of why words have always been so important to me is I've been around some great men who've had some really profound things to say, and I've been around some evil men that have used words like weapons, and I think one of the biggest lies we were ever told is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me.
It's a lie.
Yeah.
Words are powerful.
Yes, they are.
And they have cut me far deeper than any physical abuse ever did. And they also have completely changed my life for the good. Again, it didn't take much encouragement to realize that there was a better path, to realize that there's more of me in here, and I don't have to live
In the past.
and in this suboptimal existence. You're never too far gone, right? God has saved some people who have been really, truly in the depths of hell, and they put themselves there. And they don't dispute that fact, nobody does, and God has rescued them. And again, I dare say that few people that we interact with on a regular basis, not to be prejudgmental or whatever, have been to the depths that some people that I know have been saved have been through. So, all right. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, I just ask that you guide and protect everyone throughout this week, that you help them to ask the questions, what are they seeking? What is your will in their life? What one or two things could they do slightly different or a little better or a little more consistently, that just setting the small thing in order could have huge ripple effects in their life for themselves, their family, and all those that they interact with, and to give us all the courage and the wisdom to seek your will and to live it dutifully. In Jesus' name, amen.